Mas? Mas?
The boy discovered that he could enter other people's dreams, and every time he entered someone's dream, the next day, that person would die. In just a few days, 3 people had died mysteriously in succession. A bizarre and deadly nightmare. A mysterious rural bloodline. Could the boy break through the fog and save these people's fates? On a quiet evening, Max was awakened by the sound of a door opening. He heard a woman's voice, and he got up to check downstairs. A black shadow flashed by. Max closed the window. He prepared to return to the second floor, when Max heard his mother's call. In the next moment, a woman lunged at Max from behind. Max was very frightened, and he ran back to his bedroom upstairs. The woman was knocking on the door outside, begging for help. Max realized that this was indeed his mother's voice. He dashed outside, and it was pouring rain outside. His parents were sitting in the car, and they were covered in blood.
Kenapa? Kenapa kamu gak mati bersama mereka?
Ever since Max's father passed away, he had been having nightmares frequently. Max had gotten used to it. On this day, he was getting ready for school. His grandfather was watching the morning news in the living room. There was a report about a woman abandoning her child and committing suicide at home. This was already the second similar case. Max watched the television and fell into deep thought. Soon after, he took the bus to school. The eerie feeling returned on the road as Max arrived at the classroom. Today, a transfer student named Ulan was coming to the class. This girl was very beautiful, and she glanced at Max. After class, his friend Jesse told Max that Ulan had previously studied in Jakarta because she was often haunted by ghosts and had to transfer schools. No one dared to befriend her. In short, she was considered a weirdo. After class, his grandfather contacted Max, asking him to see a psychologist at the hospital. His grandfather was worried about Max's sleeplessness and had been taking Max around for medical consultations. But Max didn't want to talk about his parents' deaths. Seeing doctors hadn't helped them, and his grandfather, being old, was feeling helpless. He hired a helper named Dull from the hometown, who was responsible for household chores. In the following days, Max felt mentally exhausted because he was too afraid to sleep. He feared dreaming about his parents' tragic state. But how could one survive without sleep? That morning, the students attended the morning assembly. Max felt dazed and had difficulty breathing. In a moment of crisis, he felt Ulan holding his hand. The warm sensation dissipated his unease, but when Max came to his senses, he found that Ulan was standing at the end of the line. She couldn't possibly be holding his hand. After the meeting ended, Max dashed to the bathroom, only to be surprised that Ulan had actually followed him. She even reminded Max, no matter what he saw, he just needed to ignore it. Max took the bus home, and after a man fell asleep, leaning on his shoulder, Max tried to adjust the man's head, and he entered the man's dream. The man and his wife were crying by their daughter's bed. The man sensed the gaze of an outsider and turned to look into Max's eyes. In the next moment, Max woke up from the dream. Max wanted to avoid this bizarre experience. In the evening, he applied some sleep aid essential oil and lay down to sleep. A cold wind blew, and Max regained his senses. He woke up in a certain forest, with an ancient tree standing not far away. Max discovered that a person was trapped in the tree roots. He stepped back in fear and bumped into a blind old woman. The old woman said, "This is not a place for you to be. You need to leave here quickly." As soon as she finished speaking, a shadow appeared in the thick fog. It made a girl's voice. The girl kept calling to the person in the tree. Upon hearing her, he struggled desperately to break free. Max then realized that the person in the tree was the man from the bus. He shouted his daughter's name and followed the shadow as it vanished into the fog. Max ran away in fear and soon woke up from the dream. Downstairs, the television was reporting on a new death case. The victim was that very man. Max finally couldn't hold back and told Jesse about what happened yesterday. He suspected that the mysterious shadow in his dream was the culprit behind the recent murders. That monster could take lives in dreams. The two decided to investigate the man's house, where the deceased's wife was shouting at the door. The neighbor explained to Max and Jesse that the male owner of this house had died in the bedroom. He appeared to have suffered from sleep paralysis, and there was a strangulation mark on the man's neck. Max glanced to the side unintentionally, and he was shocked to see the blind old woman from his dream. He hurriedly chased into the alley, but in the blink of an eye, the old woman vanished. Just when Max was puzzled, Ulan came to him again. She stated that, when people fall asleep, they enter dreams, but cases like Max's, where one can enter others' dreams, while retaining their own consciousness are rare. Ulan warned Max that, if one is not careful, dreams can also be deadly. In the evening, the helper doll finished cleaning, and came over to inform Max. At this time, his grandfather was already asleep. Doll saw that, the sleep aid massage oil on the table, and pointed out that, this was an extract from the moonflower. People from his hometown said that, it could treat various ailments. Max picked up the bottle, and applied a few drops to his neck again. After falling asleep, he successfully entered the dream. This time, he saw another old woman being murdered. A rolling head looked at Max. He shouted, and ran away. In a moment of crisis, he was saved again by the blind old woman. The blind old woman finished speaking, and sent Max out of the dream. Today's news reported the death of the victim he saw in the dream. Meanwhile, Jesse found some information on the internet. So far, all the victims were from the same village, Vengeful village. Of course, this is just what is said online, and we cannot rule out the possibility of someone spreading rumors. After Ulan learned about the situation, she thought of a way to verify it. She could ask the victim's ghost to possess her, so Max could ask directly. The necklace around Ulan's neck was a talisman that could protect her from evil spirits. She sat face to face with Max. And through the reflection in the mirror, the victim entered Ulan's body. Max gathered his courage to ask. He wanted to know if she was from Vengeful village. She nodded at his question, and told Max that he must go to the western riverbank to find someone named Mustika. She has the scent of the moonflower. Only Mustika knows how to kill Sukma. As soon as she finished speaking, Ulan suddenly retreated to the wall. She climbed up the wall into the air, and with a loud shout, the furniture flew around. Grandfather and the helper came to check on the situation. Ulan realized that the two were getting closer, and she said she smelled the scent of Vengeful people. Then, she fell to the ground, and returned to normal. Max guessed that his grandfather was from Vengeful village. He asked his grandfather to tell what had happened there. Through his grandfather's account, it was learned that the Vengeful people believed they were descendants of Nagadang Lati, the guardians of Mount Merapi. The power of Nagadang Lati never fades, and the power would be passed on to future generations. That demon must have taken a liking to the power of this bloodline. That's why it harmed people in dreams. In the following days, they focused on searching for Mustika. Jesse found a flower seller that matched the description. She lived on the west side of the riverbank. After school, the two rode their electric scooter to the location. The flower seller lived in a dilapidated house. Max called out a few times, but no one responded. He pushed open the door, and unexpectedly, he bumped into the blind old woman. Max fell to the ground, and when he opened his eyes, he found himself in a dream, and this time, he also saw his parents. Max almost fell prey to the illusion, and was lured into the fog. The blind old woman quickly woke Max up, and his parents had turned into black shadows. In a critical moment, the old woman pulled Max back to reality. It turned out that she was Mustika. The old woman and Max both had the ability to enter dreams. As for that black shadow, her name was Sukma. She was the most powerful witch in Vengeful village. She was greatly respected by the villagers. Besides Sukma, there was only a boy, acting as her adopted son. She firmly believed that she was the reincarnation of Nagadang Lati. In order to study how to use dreams, Sukma did not hesitate to harm the villagers. People gradually ignored her. One day, a group of villagers kidnapped Sukma. They nailed her to a wooden cabin on the mountain top to await death. Weeks later, Sukma died. No one dared to handle her decaying corpse. Only her adopted son was willing to stay by the cabin. Days passed again, and Sukma's body disappeared. Mustika suspected that the witch wanted to seize the power of the descendants of Nagadang Lati to resurrect herself, and the adopted son was surely helping her. Mustika tossed moonflower petals into a basin of clear water, and then placed a sheet of white paper into it. Max's likeness appeared on the paper. He was the heir to the power of Nagadang Lati, the only one with hope to defeat Sukma, to defeat the powerful witch. He had to chop off her head in the dream. After hesitating, Max still agreed to help. He hadn't been able to save his parents back then. Now, he couldn't give up on saving more people. Mustika came up with a plan for Max. She told Max to first burn Sukma's corpse, so that her power would be diminished. And Mustika knew of a ritual that could unleash Max's potential. However, the ritual required someone willing to provide a dream. Ulan agreed to help Mustika complete the ritual.
Apapun yang terjadi, ikuti nalurimu.
Mustika pressed Max into the pool. Max felt himself sinking endlessly. Finally, his feet touched the ground, and he entered Ulan's dream. In her childhood, Ulan witnessed her mother being killed. For many years, she repeatedly dreamed of the crime scene. This time, with Max's help, the tragedy in the dream was reversed. Ulan's mother avoided the stab of the robber. She threw herself back into her mother's embrace. She finally resolved her emotional knot, and Max's abilities were also enhanced. However, after Mustika intervened, she was soon targeted by someone. That evening, a man broke into her home and stabbed Mustika to death. From his blurred profile, the man appeared to be the helper Dul, the adopted son of Sukma. Dul had struggled to survive, just to resurrect his adoptive mother and take revenge for her. Max soon learned about Mustika's murder. Her manner of death was different from the victims in the dream, so Max suspected that this must have been the work of Sukma's adopted son. Just then, Ulan felt unwell. Her necklace broke. This is a lullaby sung by the Bajingkio people. In the next moment, Ulan slammed into the table in a frenzy. A few male classmates quickly grabbed her as the doors and windows of the classroom closed. Sukma roared and pushed everyone aside. She seized Max by the neck. Sukma slammed him against the blackboard. Jessie, disregarding the danger, rushed forward to stop her, but she was thrown down by Sukma. Several male classmates stepped up to intervene. Some were bitten on the wrist by Sukma. Max pulled down the tablecloth, covering Sukma's head with it. He and the chair flew into the air. Finally, Max picked up a pen and stabbed it through Ulan's palm, which forced Sukma out of her body. Meanwhile, Jessie recorded the song Ulan sang while possessed. From the lyrics, it seemed to be some kind of lullaby. Max stated that he often heard this song in his dreams. Hearing this, Jessie rushed to Max's house and found a voodoo doll under his bed. It must be this thing causing trouble, allowing Sukma to invade Max's dreams. Who put the doll in the bedroom? Besides his grandfather, there was only doll in the house. They realized that something was off about that person. He hurried downstairs to check the situation, only to find his grandfather passed out on the bed, and there was also a voodoo doll underneath his bed. To wake his grandfather, he had to enter his grandfather's dream, but his grandfather had already fallen into Sukma's grasp. In a critical moment, Max recalled Mustika's words, "No matter what happens, always follow your instincts." Understanding this, Max suddenly unleashed his energy and trapped Sukma. Max helped his grandfather leave, but soon, the witch broke free from her bindings and chased after them. She clung to Max relentlessly. His grandfather picked up a wooden stake and stabbed it through her neck. Max forcefully pushed against the tip, using the pain to return to reality, but he couldn't save his grandfather. Max was unable to enter the dream again. He couldn't afford to lose his only family member. Since he couldn't enter his grandfather's dream, he decided to let Sukma enter his dream. Before sleeping, Max wrote down Dul's address. He asked Jessie to go there to look for Sukma's corpse. Ulan was worried, so she decided to go along. As Max held the voodoo doll to enter the dream, he saw the day his parents went out. The car was old and worn. His mother felt very uneasy, but his father insisted on driving. Max got into the car with his parents, taking on the responsibility of driving. To avoid a repeat of the disaster, Max deliberately avoided the curve where the accident happened. His mother looked grim.
Harusnya kita lewat sana.
In the next moment, Sukma appeared in the back seat of the car. Max hurriedly opened the door and jumped out, and with a flip, he found himself back in the familiar dream forest. Sukma reached out and lifted him into the air and slashed his chest. Max struggled to break free, following his instincts. In the void, Max grabbed a dagger. He began to fight Sukma. Meanwhile, Jessie and Ulan arrived at Dul's house, and in the center of the dilapidated room, they saw Sukma's corpse. Jessie handed a match to Ulan, and she went to find a bucket of gasoline, before they could set the body on fire. Dull appeared with a machete. He had no grudge against the dead. Dull had caused all this trouble, simply to resurrect his mother. Dull lunged at the two of them, after he finished speaking, and it seemed he was about to kill Jessie. Ulan picked up a stick, and struck Dull from behind. At this moment, both groups of protagonists were caught in a fierce battle. Max was forced into a dead end by Sukma, while Jessie stood up again. She gave it her all to fight Dull. The battle between the two sides was intense. Max and Jessie were at a disadvantage. Max suddenly spat out blood. In a critical moment, Ulan seized the opportunity to pour gasoline on the corpse. Jessie held onto Dull tightly, which led to a flurry of blows. Ulan stepped forward, and knocked Dull unconscious. Then she struck a match, and threw it at the corpse. In the moment the flames ignited. Sukma's magic was affected. Max picked up a wooden root from the ground, and smashed Sukma's head. He dragged his grandfather out from the tree, and returned to reality. This time, Max finally turned the situation around, and saved his family. He gradually resolved his emotional knots. Max no longer suffered from insomnia. He and Ulan developed a beautiful romance. The film ends here. Nightmares are actually a popular theme in horror films. The most famous one is the 1984 film, A Nightmare on Elm Street. This one shows traces of imitation of the classics. Rather than being a horror film, it's more like a fantasy movie. The straightforward narrative style made the overall effect of the film bland, and it was hard to engage the audience's tension. It lacked a sense of rhythm and pacing, but overall, the content structure was fine, and the visual effects were acceptable. If you like my channel, please give me a subscription.